February 20th, 1943, north of Kasserine Pass, Tunisia. Dust, smoke, broken terrain. 5 American Sherman tanks advanced through chaos as if guided by a single mind. No flags, no flares, no messengers, only voices. Calm, clear, echoing through the static of the battlefield. From July 1941, the U.S. Army had standardized its tank radio systems, the SCR-508 and 528. Inside each tank, the BC-604 transmitter delivered 25 watts of power, operating between 20 and 27.9 megahertz across 10 crystal-controlled channels. The BC-603 dual receivers let commanders monitor 2 frequencies at once. The BC-606 intercom connected every crewman through throat microphones, letting them speak through the roar of the engine. Each Sherman became a living node in the world's first battlefield network. Across the line, German Panzer IVs fought in isolation. Their Fuji 5 AM radios, 10 watts, 27 to 33 megahertz, were crippled by static, their range collapsing to a few hundred meters when moving. Most carried only receivers. When a command tank was destroyed, entire platoons went silent. That morning at Kasserine, the Americans revealed a new kind of weapon, one that left no smoke, no shell casings, no sound of detonation. Invisible waves binding every tank into one mind. It wasn't the thickness of armor that changed the war. It was the weight of 181 pounds of radio inside every Sherman that turned chaos into coordination and silence into victory. North of Kasserine Pass, Tunisia, February 1943. The desert shimmered with heat and smoke. Dust rolled like a living thing, wrapping the battlefield in a yellow haze. German Panzer IVs waited on the ridge, their guns already trained. Every textbook, every doctrine of the Wehrmacht said the next few minutes would end in an American rout. But then the impossible happened. 5 Sherman tanks, scattered across broken ground, emerged through the haze and moved as one. Each adjusted speed, angle, and line of fire in perfect rhythm, as if connected by an invisible thread. No flags, no flares, no messengers racing between vehicles. They advanced, halted, and fired in unison, an organism made of steel. Inside a Panzer, Captain Erich Menzel fought against a wall of static. His Fuji 5 radio hissed and cracked, drowning his commander's voice. He shouted over the engine, but no one heard. Across the valley, Lieutenant Bill Morgan's Sherman crew heard everything. Clear, calm, precise. Bravo 2, turn 15 degrees left. Fox 3, hold position behind the ridge. Within seconds, every tank adjusted. When the smoke cleared, the panzers were burning. What the Germans witnessed that morning defied every page of their manuals. It was the first visible proof of a revolution they didn't yet understand. A war fought through invisible waves. Victory that day had nothing to do with thicker armor or a bigger gun. It came from the quiet hum of radio circuits hidden inside each Sherman. The SCR-508, a weapon the Germans couldn't see, measure, or comprehend. While they perfected the art of steel, the Americans were mastering the science of connection. In an age obsessed with firepower, the United States had unknowingly built the first networked army. 2 years earlier, in the summer of 1941, a group of engineers at Galvin Manufacturing Company, later known as Motorola, were experimenting with something radical: frequency modulation. Until then, nearly every military radio in the world used amplitude modulation, AM. It worked barely, but in combat it was a nightmare. Every spark plug, every electric motor, every burst of artillery created a scream of static that buried voices. Engineer Daniel E. Noble believed FM could fix it. He recruited Henryk Magnuski, a Polish refugee and radio genius, to turn theory into hardware. Together, they designed a transmitter that could survive inside a tank, an environment filled with vibration, heat, dust, and electrical chaos. The result weighed 181 pounds. Inside that box, a BC-604 transmitter producing 25 watts, more than twice the German standard. Dual BC-603 receivers, allowing a commander to monitor 2 nets at once. A range between 20.0 and 27.9 megahertz, divided into 10 crystal-controlled channels that never drifted. A built-in BC-606 intercom connecting every crewman through throat microphones that filtered engine noise. For the first time, an armored platoon could talk, clearly, simultaneously, reliably. Each tank became a node in the world's first digital age idea, born in analog form, a battlefield network. When the U.S. Army adopted the SCR-508 in July 1941, it made a decision that quietly changed modern warfare. Every tank would carry a transmitter and receiver. Germany had pioneered radio-equipped armor in the 1930s, but only the command tank could transmit. The rest listened. When the command tank was hit, the platoon went blind. The Americans reversed the logic. In their design, every vehicle could lead, every crew could report, every gunner could call for fire. It was a democratic network, messy, flexible, alive. That difference in philosophy would define every battlefield that followed. For the Wehrmacht, command was vertical. For the Americans, communication was lateral. A web, not a chain. November 8, 1942. Operation Torch, the first American landing in North Africa. When the 2nd Armored Division rolled ashore near Safi and Fadala, each Sherman carried an SCR-508 straight from Detroit's assembly lines. During the first engagements, German intercept units listening from the hills were stunned. Their notes read, "Enemy transmissions are exceptionally clear, free of interference, and appear to originate from every tank." The Africa Corps, veterans of Poland and France, had never encountered such coherence. For them, coordination required visual contact or motorcycle couriers weaving between shell bursts. For the Americans, it required nothing more than pressing a switch. By the time the Battle of Kasserine erupted 3 months later, the advantage was absolute. Even when scattered across 50 miles, elements of the 1st Armored Division maneuvered as if they were a single formation. German observers called it supernatural. It wasn't. It was 25 watts of organized chaos. Inside the German army, radio had once been sacred. General Heinz Guderian had built blitzkrieg around it. But by 1943, German industry could no longer keep pace. For every 5,700 tanks built, fewer than 2,000 Fuji 5 transceivers left the factories. Most tanks carried receivers only. Technically, the Fuji 5 was a masterpiece for its time, in the 1930s. 10 watts of power, 27 to 33 megahertz, amplitude modulation. But in motion, the range dropped from 2 miles to a few hundred yards. Every ignition pulse, every track vibration leaked into the circuit as static. The result, a paradox. The army that invented radio warfare entered 1943 nearly deaf. Back home, Chicago's Motorola plant was rewriting industrial logistics. Before the war, they built car radios. Now they built the nervous system of the U.S. Army. Each SCR-508 contained 2,748 individual components, 474 capacitors, 385 resistors, dozens of vacuum tubes, all tested for shock and temperature. In 1942, production reached 3,800 units. In 1943, 11,400. In 1944, 24,000. By the end of the war, over 50,000 radio sets, enough for every Sherman ever made. No other nation achieved that ratio, 100% connectivity. Even the mighty Panzer divisions rarely exceeded 20%. The difference wasn't just numbers, it was philosophy. The Americans didn't see communication as luxury equipment. They saw it as life support. With universal radios came a new tactical idea, the combat command. Instead of rigid battalions, U.S. armored divisions formed temporary task forces, mixes of tanks, infantry, artillery, and engineers tailored for each mission. Such flexibility would have been impossible without standardized, interoperable radios. Orders no longer crawled down the chain of command. They flowed horizontally, instantly. An artillery observer could talk directly to a tank platoon. An engineer unit could call for covering fire. The battlefield ceased to be a line. It became a network. And on that network, time itself bent. Decisions that once took minutes now took seconds. For tank crews, the change was deeply human. Inside the steel hull, the roar of the engine had once meant isolation. Now through the headset came voices, familiar, steady, alive. A driver could hear his commander breathing. A gunner could crack a joke over static. Many crews later said the radio was their lifeline. Even when lost, even when surrounded, as long as the voice on the other end answered, they felt they still belonged to something larger. In German tanks, silence ruled. Crews banged on armor or shouted through intercom tubes. A commander's death meant muteness. The difference wasn't technical, it was psychological. One side fought connected, the other alone. By mid-1943, German analysts began noticing a disturbing pattern. Wherever American tanks appeared, chaos followed. Not in their ranks, but in German ones. Reports from Tunisia to Sicily carried the same line. Enemy armor exhibits coordination beyond visible control. They tried to explain it as superior training, discipline, luck. None guessed the truth. The revolution was electromagnetic. For the first time, information itself had become a weapon. In a world where seeing first and shooting first determined survival, the ability to speak first and be heard became even deadlier. When the U.S. Army landed in Sicily in July 1943, the SCR-508 network extended across sea and air. Naval fire missions were adjusted directly from tank radios on shore, a feat German officers had considered impossible. Through mountain passes and valleys, FM proved stronger than terrain. While AM signals died in echoes, FM sliced through reflection and static. In those hills, the radio's invisible precision reshaped doctrine again. Communication no longer followed geography. Even when mountains separated units, their voices carried. Tactics once limited by line of sight became three-dimensional. For German panzer crews trapped by ridge lines and dead zones, it was a nightmare. Out of the desert and into Italy, a new military truth took form. The strength of a force lies not in the armor of its machines, but in the bandwidth of its conversation. In the smoky classrooms of the U.S. Army Signal School, instructors began using a new phrase: the radio is the weapon. They were right. It killed ignorance, confusion, delay, the silent killers of every army before. When Patton's Third Army later stormed across France, his command cars carried 5 radios each, linked to air, artillery, and logistics nets. What had begun with the SCR-508 inside a Sherman now pulsed through an entire continent. By late 1943, the invisible weapon was everywhere. From North Africa to the mountains of Italy, every American tank, truck, and command post vibrated with the low hum of FM. The next challenge would be Europe itself. The hedgerows, the forests, the chaos of Normandy. There, radio would face its ultimate trial, not open desert, but a maze of earth and smoke where sight meant nothing. As D-Day approached, technicians retuned thousands of crystals, engineers reinforced vacuum tubes, and commanders rewrote procedures for an invasion driven entirely by voice. The coming storm would prove that the true power of a tank lay not in its gun, but in the conversation it could sustain under fire. Dawn over Normandy, gray water, steel landing craft pitching in the surf. On the horizon, the French coast burns. Among the first machines rolling off the ramps are Sherman tanks of the 741st Tank Battalion, each one carrying a small, humming heart inside, the SCR-508. As the ramps drop, chaos erupts, mines, surf, gunfire, but voices still cut through the static. Red One, I'm stuck. Water rising. Copy Red One. Reverse 5 yards. Find solid ground. We're still with you. Within seconds, crews that cannot even see each other move as a single line. Through headsets soaked with salt water, an invisible order forms. The invasion of Europe has begun. And for the first time in history, an army lands already connected. On Omaha and Utah beaches, most visual signals vanish in the smoke. Runners are shot before reaching the dunes. Yet the armored units keep moving. Tank commanders shout coordinates into microphones. Destroyers offshore adjust their guns in response. Those calls travel from a Sherman on the sand, through an FM relay truck, up to the bridge of a warship 5 miles out. No flags, no wires, just the pulse of radio. German observers cannot believe it. They watch platoons coordinating under direct fire, changing formations mid-assault. They see artillery strikes landing within minutes of first contact. The reports later filed to Berlin call it a form of radio control beyond our comprehension. Within each Sherman, the noise is unbearable. engine, gun, surf. But inside the intercom, it's calm, clipped, human. Driver forward, 20 meters. Gunner, target, machine gun nest, 11 o'clock. Target acquired, firing. Every command, every correction is carried by throat microphone. Each crewman hears not chaos, but a rhythm, the rhythm of coordination. When the turret turns, the loader braces without looking. When the driver halts, the gunner already knows why. That synchronicity is the product of something unseen, the steady, unbroken tone of FM. By mid-morning, new trouble appears. Infantry scattered among the dunes try to call tanks for support, but their radios cannot talk to each other. The Sherman's SCR-508 works between 20 and 27.9 megahertz. The infantry's SCR-300 operates between 40 and 48 megahertz. The two systems are strangers. In the hedgerows of Normandy, this gap becomes deadly. German Panzer IVs teams crawl within yards of American tanks, unseen by their own infantry. A sergeant screams into his SCR-300, but no one inside the tank hears. Shells explode. Crews die not from enemy fire, but from silence. The solution is almost primitive. Tank crews weld ammunition boxes to the rear armor and mount inside each one a simple EE 8-field telephone. A wire runs through the hull to the intercom. Now infantry can pick up the handset, bang on the armor, and talk directly to the crew inside. This is Baker Company. There's an 88 ahead. Turn left 2 fields. Copy, Baker, moving. It takes weeks to install, hours to save lives. By Operation Cobra in July, nearly every Sherman carries one. For the first time, tank and infantry speak the same language through copper and courage. July 25th to 30th, 1944. The 2nd Armored Division under Major General Edward H. Brooks prepares to break the German lines near St. Lo. 200 Sherman tanks line the fields, each tuned to its own channel in the FM network. At 0900 hours, the sky opens. B-17 bombers blanket the front with explosives. When the dust clears, the tanks roll forward, guided not by flags or bugles, but by voices. Blue 2 to command. Enemy armor left flank, grid Q6. Roger, tank destroyers, engage Q6. Within minutes, artillery adjusts, fighters dive, and the armored column shifts direction as if one organism. Observers on the German side report the phenomenon with disbelief. The Americans react faster than we can issue orders. They fight by radio, not by sight. Across the valley, the elite Panzer Lehr Division fights in silence. Most of its tanks carry no working radios. Commanders wave flags or fire flares that disappear in the dust. When their command tanks are destroyed, the entire unit stalls. One captured German operator later said, "We had better tanks, but we were deaf. Every battle felt like fighting inside a coffin." In those hedgerows, the difference between 25 watts of FM clarity and 10 watts of AM static became the difference between coordination and chaos. After Cobra, U.S. doctrine changes overnight. Every tank, artillery battery, and infantry regiment is assigned overlapping radio nets. The principle is simple. If you can see the fight, you must be able to speak to it. Sherman platoons carry 2 radios, one for armor, one for infantry. Forward air controllers join the network, guiding P-47 Thunderbolts onto German columns within minutes. The battlefield transforms into a living web of voices. What began as a technical upgrade has become a new philosophy of war, total integration through communication. Veterans of North Africa recognize the contrast. At Kasserine, messages took 15 minutes to relay through confusion. In Normandy, the same order travels in 30 seconds. Fire missions that once took half an hour arrive within 5. Statistics from the Signal Corps show the transformation. Average response time for artillery support, from 20 minutes, 4. Range of communication, moving, from 1 mile to 7. Coordination rate between tank and infantry, 100%. No new gun, no thicker armor could equal that kind of speed. It was not a mechanical advantage, it was temporal. The Americans had conquered time. Captured German reports from late 1944 misinterpret what they witness. One intelligence note reads, "American tank units exhibit exceptional discipline and coordination, apparently the result of strict radio procedure." They mistake technology for training. They never realized that every Sherman carries the same transmitter as a command tank. While the Germans target vehicles with multiple antennas, believing them to be command posts, every Sherman is a command post. The old doctrine collapses, but the realization comes too late. As the Allied armies surge across France, the SCR-508 network stretches over hundreds of miles. Patton's Third Army, advancing 400 miles in a single month, operates like a single organism. Orders flow through 3 layers of radio nets: strategic, operational, tactical, without losing clarity. From the cab of his Jeep, Patton can speak directly to tank commanders miles away. He often does. One day near Argentan, he transmits simply, "Keep your damn antennas up, gentlemen. They win battles." The network has become the bloodstream of an army that never sleeps. At night, crews rest inside their tanks. Engines cool, guns silent, but the radio stays on, a soft hiss in the headphones. Sometimes they hear music from a field transmitter or a distant voice checking in. "All stations, this is Command Net. Sit rep at 0600, stay sharp." That faint crackle becomes comfort. To be connected is to be alive. The silence of a dead radio, veterans later said, was the worst sound of all. Back in Germany, Heinz Guderian reads reports of American coordination with disbelief. He knows the truth yet can do nothing. Factories bombed, copper scarce, vacuum tubes rationed. Of the 12,000 medium and heavy tanks built that year, fewer than 2,000 carry working transceivers. In a memorandum dated December 1944, he admits, "The enemy's communication superiority neutralizes our material advantages." The father of Blitzkrieg watches his own creation devoured by a better signal. As 1944 ends, the Allies hold not just more ground, but more awareness. Every division can see beyond its own horizon through shared information. Tank radios feed into artillery grids, which feed into air coordination nets. The battlefield becomes a closed loop. Observe, transmit, strike. For the Wehrmacht, bound to rigid hierarchies and wired phones, time stretches into paralysis. By the time a German report reaches headquarters, the situation has already changed. By the time a counter order returns, the unit no longer exists. The war has pivoted. Firepower still matters, but information moves faster than steel. And in 1944, speed means life. September 1944, Lorraine. The 4th Armored Division faces German Panzer brigades equipped with superior Panther tanks. On paper, the Americans should lose. But the SCR-508 network turns the fight upside down. Each Sherman calls in enemy sightings instantly. Tank destroyers hidden behind hills adjust fire by radio. Artillery observers in command tanks coordinate barrages within minutes. In 3 weeks, the division destroys 281 German armored vehicles while losing 41 of its own, a 7-to-1 ratio. The report filed afterward reads simply, "The enemy could not coordinate, we could." It is the purest demonstration of radio as weapon. December 1944, the Ardennes, snow, fog, confusion, the Battle of the Bulge. Once again, radio defines survival. German units strike through the forest relying on secrecy and surprise, but their FUG-5 sets fail in the cold, their batteries freeze. When their lines of communication break, entire battalions drift apart. American tanks, even isolated, keep talking. Across the blizzard, through static, voices persist. "Red 2, engine out, holding the crossroads." "Copy, Red 2, reinforcements inbound, hold tight." Those fragments keep units alive for days. The sound of a human voice becomes a weapon stronger than steel. By March 1945, the U.S. Army reaches the Rhine. The network built since 1942 now covers an entire continent. Commanders shift divisions with the same ease that platoons once moved tanks. When the 9th Armored Division finds the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen intact, the report travels by radio to 1st Army headquarters within minutes. Within an hour, orders redirect 3 divisions to exploit the gap. The Germans, still dependent on telephones, react too late. A bridge survives, an empire dies, all because one signal gets through first. Historians often mark 1944 as the year of material superiority. But beneath the visible battles lay a deeper shift. The moment when the side that could communicate faster began to dictate the rhythm of war itself. From Omaha to Aracourt, every victory traced the same invisible pattern: voice, response, coordination, domination. The Sherman's radio had turned an army of individuals into a single organism. The world had entered the age where connection equals power. As the Allies push toward the Rhine, the war grows colder, quieter, more psychological. The radios stay warm while everything else freezes. The voices on the net sound tired now, but still alive. The next phase will reveal the deepest truth of this new warfare. Not that radios win battles, but that silence loses them. Night, snow falling through black pines, engines idling in the cold. At -20 degrees, metal breathes like a living thing. Across the Ardennes, the quiet before the storm is broken by radio voices, low, calm, crackling through the static. Red 2, this is Able Command. Hold your position. Copy, Able. Visibility 0, still holding. Minutes later, the forest erupts. Artillery tears the sky open. Panzer columns thunder through the trees. Operation Wacht am Rhein, the German counteroffensive that will become the Battle of the Bulge, has begun. Within hours, telephone lines are cut, runners lost in snow, maps made useless. But American tanks keep talking. Their SCR-508 radios pierce the blizzard with steady FM clarity. The network survives even when roads and supply chains collapse. Across a frozen front, voices remain linked. Threads of sound binding an army in the dark. For the Wehrmacht, the winter is a wall of silence. Fuji 5 sets falter in the cold. Vacuum tubes shatter from the freeze. Power drops with each turn of the engine. Signal range shrinks to hundreds of meters. Couriers on motorcycles replace radio, riding blind through snowstorms. A German officer later writes in his diary, "We fought alone. We heard no orders, no friends, only the wind." Across the valley, American crews hear constant updates from headquarters. Coordinates, weather, reinforcements. Every signal reminds them they are still part of something larger than the snow. December 21st, 1944. Bastogne is surrounded. The 101st Airborne and elements of the 10th Armored Division are cut off from supply lines. For 6 days, they endure bombardment without food or medical aid. In the command post beneath the town, General McAuliffe sends his message to the Germans. One word, nuts. It travels out not by runner or messenger, but through the same radio net that connects the encircled forces to Patton's Third Army. At his headquarters in Luxembourg, Patton hears the transmission and smiles. He answers on the net, "Hold fast, relief on the way." Through snow and static, the words reach Bastogne within minutes, a lifeline of sound stronger than any supply line of steel. When the 4th Armored Division breaks the encirclement on December 26th, the Signal Corps notes that radio traffic never ceased, not once, during the siege. In a war of machines, faith itself had traveled by frequency. For tank crews fighting in snow and darkness, the radio is more than a tool. It's company. They speak in short bursts, sometimes just to hear a human voice. "Dog 3 to command, still alive." "Copy that, Dog 3. You're not alone." Those simple phrases carry more than information. They carry belief. Crews know that as long as someone answers, they exist. The radio becomes a heartbeat echoing through metal and fear. In German tanks, silence is a weight. Without intercoms, men shout over the engine. When the commander is hit, orders die with him. Isolation kills before any shell does. The Wehrmacht's counteroffensive fails not just from fuel shortage or Allied air power, but from the breakdown of command. When communications fail, strategy disintegrates. Units fight blind. Reinforcements arrive in the wrong valley. Artillery fires on its own infantry. In one sector, Panzer Lehr tries to coordinate with 2nd SS Das Reich. Their signals never meet. When night falls, the two divisions collide by mistake. It's the sound of an army devouring itself. As winter breaks, the snow melts into mud. American columns advance again. Now the radio network expands beyond the platoon. It covers entire theaters. Every division has 3 parallel nets: command, artillery, and logistics. Air liaison officers plug directly into tank frequencies. Engineers on pontoon bridges coordinate with Shermans crossing under fire. The U.S. Army has quietly invented real-time warfare. The weapon is not the radio set itself. It is the speed of communication. March 7th, 1945. Scouts from the 9th Armored Division find the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen still intact. A lieutenant keys his transmitter. Bridge standing. Enemy charges unlit. Within 3 minutes, the message reaches 1st Army headquarters. Within an hour, 3 divisions are rerouted to the site. By nightfall, American tanks are across the Rhine, the first since Napoleon. German forces scramble to react, but their telephone lines are gone. Bombers have cut every wire. They cannot match a command chain that travels at the speed of light. Remagen is not just a battlefield victory, it's a proof of concept for network warfare. Inside a tank on the east bank of the Rhine, the crew listens to the steady hum of their set. Orders come through layer after layer of signal nets. Gunners adjust fire based on reports from infantry 2 miles away. Command to all units, enemy column east bank, grid 3 Alpha. Copy grid 3 Alpha. Firing now. Each phrase is a tiny mechanical miracle. Vibration turned to current, current to voice, voice to action. The result is motion without hesitation. The tank is no longer a machine of armor, but a nerve cell in a larger brain. A German soldier captured near Remagen says simply, "They knew where we were before we did." He is right. The radio net turns information into sight. Each voice adds to a collective map of the battlefield invisible to the enemy. For the first time, awareness itself is a weapon. The contrast is psychological. American crews feel connected, even when alone. German crews feel alone, even when surrounded by others. Connection gives confidence. Isolation breeds fear. Technology has crossed into the human soul. April 1945. The Ruhr industrial region is surrounded. 300,000 German troops trapped. Inside the pocket, communication collapses. Headquarters cannot reach field units. Units cannot reach each other. American forces close the circle, guided by radio spotters in tanks and jeeps. Artillery follows their calls with mathematical precision. Field Marshal Walter Model's final message before losing contact reads, "No contact with adjacent units. No contact with high command. Fighting continues. Coordination impossible." Days later, the entire army surrenders. The guns stop firing, but the static continues, a ghost of signals with no receiver. In the months after Germany's surrender, Allied intelligence teams collect thousands of German radios. Their report, Technical Intelligence number 176, concludes, German tank communications are approximately 5 years behind American standards. The difference lies in 3 words: frequency modulation, standardization, distribution. The U.S. made every tank a talking machine. Germany made only a few. The result was not just a technological gap, it was a conceptual one. They believed in the individual vehicle. America believed in the network. And in the modern age, the network always wins. Every war has 2 battles, one outside, one inside. The outer war is fought with steel, the inner one with silence. For German tank crews, that silence was hell. The moment you realized no one could hear you, you could fight bravely, fire accurately, die honorably, and still be alone. For American crews, hell was no less real, but they never faced it alone. Even when cut off, even when engines burned, the headset still crackled. That crackle was hope disguised as noise. After the war, recordings from the Signal Corps archives preserve snippets of those voices. "This is Dog 3. Engine gone. We're hit. Dog 3, hang on. We've got you in sight." It's not heroic dialogue. It's ordinary men refusing to let each other disappear into noise. Those voices remind us that technology does not replace humanity. It extends it. The radio turned fear into conversation, and conversation into survival. By the spring of 1945, the U.S. Army's communication structure has evolved beyond recognition. Each armored division functions as a data grid of its time. Platoons feed reports to companies, companies to battalions, battalions to division command, all through radio. It is the prototype of the digital battlefield. No longer does a general wait hours for information. He hears it live. No longer does a tank fight alone. It is an antenna in a nation of antennas. The technology is primitive. The idea is eternal. Connectivity has replaced strength as the measure of power. By April, Germany is dying, but the airwaves are alive. Every American frequency buzzes with movement. armor, artillery, air, engineers, all merged into one pulse. What began as a technical advantage has become a philosophy of existence. To be connected is to survive. When the war ends, that lesson will outlive every tank that carried it. Rain drifts over the ruins of the Ruhr. The air smells of metal and fire. Sherman tanks idle along a shattered road, their antennas trembling in the wind. Somewhere inside, a radio hums, the same tone that began in Tunisia 2 years before. The war is almost over, yet the network still lives. Every Sherman, every truck, every field set hums with quiet electricity. Through the mud, through the static, voices continue to thread across a dying continent. Across the lines, the Wehrmacht is dissolving into silence. Command posts bombed, wires cut, generators out of fuel. Entire divisions now fight without orders, blind and mute. What began as a war of armor has ended as a war of connection, and the side that kept speaking has already won. After the Rhine crossings, the Allied armies move like water, each corps connected by overlapping nets. Command, artillery, air support, logistics. Tank radios feed into division relay trucks. Aircraft pick up signals mid-flight. Orders that once took hours now move in seconds. In April 1945, this living network becomes unstoppable. When a bridge collapses near Wessel, engineers arrive before the tanks stop moving. When German armor appears near Paderborn, fighter bombers are overhead within minutes. The battlefield has become a synchronized organism, a web of awareness stretching from jeep to bomber. This is not luck or numbers. It is what happens when every soldier becomes a transmitter. In Berlin, General Heinz Guderian, the father of Blitzkrieg, reads the final situation reports. Panzer Lehr has 30 tanks left, most without radios. Fuel convoys can't find their regiments. Headquarters receives reports hours too late. In his last memorandum to Hitler, Guderian writes, "The Americans do not win through armor, but through their ability to make every vehicle a command post." It is the confession of a man watching his own invention turned against him. He once said, "Without radio, a tank is a blind iron box." Now Germany's tanks are blind again, and the box has become their coffin. May 8th, 1945. Berlin. In a dim room at Karlshorst, Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel signs Germany's surrender. As he rises, he glances across the table at the American officers, their uniforms marked with the patch of the Signal Corps. He mutters the line that will echo through history, "You built better communication. We built better tanks." Whether the words are true or legend no longer matters. They capture the essence of the war's ending. Germany perfected machines. America perfected coordination. And coordination, not machinery, shaped the century to come. Far from the ruins of Europe, in a quiet lab in Chicago, two engineers read about the surrender. Daniel E. Noble and Henrik Magnuski, the minds behind the SCR-508. They are not soldiers. They never set foot on a battlefield. Yet their inventions spoke across continents. They solved problems no doctrine could: vibration, voltage, clarity under fire. Their transmitter, the BC-604, delivered 25 watts of voice so clear that artillery could aim through static. A sign still hangs in the old Motorola factory. A clear signal means a living soldier. They built clarity, and clarity saved lives. A decade later, when the Bundeswehr rises from the ashes, its first textbooks teach one lesson: communication first. The Leopard 1 tank carries dual FM radios based directly on American designs. The manual begins with a single line: "Defeat came from silence." The generation that once worshipped the individual machine now trains to fight as a network. From ruin, a new philosophy is born: information before firepower. In 1946, engineers at the Soviet Armor School in Kubinka disassemble captured Shermans. Inside each one, they find the same mystery: small, clean circuits, crystal control, frequency stability. Their report concludes, "The Americans turned radio from accessory into doctrine." Within a decade, Soviet T-54 and T-55 tanks roll off the line, carrying FM sets modeled on the SCR-508. Even enemies learn from the language of waves. When the guns fall silent, the invisible war continues. American analysts in 1945 began using a new phrase: information dominance. They realized what the Germans never understood: that awareness can be mass-produced, A radio is not a piece of hardware, it is an amplifier of thought. It lets one mind command 1,000 bodies at once. It turns chaos into choreography. From 1945 onward, every doctrine, from Patton's mobility to Eisenhower's command systems, is rewritten around this truth. The weapon of the future is not explosive, it's instantaneous. The Cold War begins not with a gunshot, but with a signal. The same engineers who built the SCR-508 designed the AN/VRC series, the first modular field radios. From these, the lineage grows: SINCGARS, SATCOM, data link, GPS. The roots of every modern command network trace back to a 25-watt transmitter inside a Sherman tank. In Korea, Pershing and Patton tanks still carry their descendants. In Vietnam, the jungle hums with FM chatter. In the Gulf War of 1991, digital radios link Abrams tanks and Apache helicopters in real-time coordination. A straight line from 1942 to modern network-centric warfare. The form changes. The principle never does. The connected survive, the isolated die. War is never about machines alone. The radio's greatest achievement was not tactical, but human. Inside every Sherman, the headset created a shared consciousness. Men stopped being isolated fragments of fear. They became a voice joined to other voices, forming a calm center within chaos. A veteran later said, "As long as I heard someone answer, I knew I wasn't dead yet." That hum, that faint crackle became the sound of hope. In contrast, German veterans of the Panzer divisions described their final battles as silent terror, the loneliness of shouting into nothing. The real battlefield, they realized too late, was not made of steel but of sound. When the Signal Corps Museum opened at Fort Monmouth, they displayed a single quote on a brass plate. In 1942, America built not just tanks, but a network. That network reshaped the world. It taught armies, nations, and eventually entire societies that connection equals survival. The same logic would later build computer networks, satellites, the internet. The world that emerged after 1945 still runs on the same invisible rhythm born in the roar of the Sherman's engine. The FM wave, stable, clear, unbreakable, outlasted every empire it touched. Historians once called World War II a war of steel, but its true legacy lies in the spectrum. In those invisible bands between 20 and 28 megahertz where the modern world began. The Germans believed victory came from armor thickness and gun caliber. The Americans discovered victory in bandwidth and frequency stability. The side that could coordinate became stronger than the side that could merely strike. From that realization came a new equation. Connection equals power. Silence equals defeat. May 1945. Somewhere in central Germany, a Sherman crew waits for orders. The static on their headsets fades. "All stations, this is command. Cease fire. Cease fire." The driver leans back. The gunner removes his throat mic. For the first time in 4 years, the airwaves are quiet. Outside, the world is smoke and ruin. Inside, the radio is still warm, its tubes glowing faintly like embers. The hum that carried a generation through war fades into silence, but its echo remains in every signal that follows. The war of machines is over. The war of information has just begun.